Okay guys, this week we're going to put together a trifold brochure for the Broad, very similar to what you're doing for the OC Planetarium, so I'm hoping this will be really helpful for you. So I'm going to start with my comp. I have folded an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper into roughly thirds to kind of figure out how this is going to fold out. So on the cover I want a dramatic, big type with a red background because there's not much to say other than this is the Broad and I want to get people to pick it up. Then when you open it, I want the right side to be red with white type and the left side to be artwork. So that's really important how these two work together. You don't want type next to type or image next to image. You want to break it up. And then when you open it, the center will be the collection. The right side will be all about the shop. And we'll still have those left photos that work even when it's open, which is really important. Then on the back is just the business of the hours, accessibility, and parking. So now, as I lay this out, I'll look at it straight down, building this as page 1 and this as page 2. So let's get started putting it together. So we'll start by setting up our document, and it's 8.5 by 11, but it's actually landscape, so 11 wide, 8.5 high. We do not want facing pages. We won't need those until we get to our next section about brochures. So I'll fill you in on that then. We want 2 pages. We want 1 column. I'm going to put 0.5 inches, half an inch margin around this whole thing. I can always change it if I get squeezed too tight for copy, but I can start out here this way. And of course, we always have our minimum bleed. Okay, we've got our 2 pages now. We just have to set up our fold lines and our margins. So remember that in a trifold, 1 panel on each page is slightly smaller so that it can fold in on the flap. So that means this left flap is the shorter one. So I'm going to drag a margin out, and I know that this one is just a little bit shorter than the others, and it's going to be 3.624. And that's standard for an 8.5 by 11 trifold. That's standard for the shorter panel. Now we have to mark this other panel. These 2 panels are both the exact same size, which is 3.688. So all I have to do to get the next one is throw a guide out there and then let InDesign do the math. So the first panel was 3.624, and I'm going to add 3.688 because that's the next size panel. So already I have my fold lines, and then I'm going to indicate those fold lines with a line above the bleed line so that we don't get caught in our pre-flight. I'm going to set it right here, and I've got to make sure that it has 3.624. It has to be really precise. And the standard is to make that a dashed line. We don't want to make it too thick a line because that throws off the cutting. So this goes through a cutting machine after it prints, and they line it up by these marks. We can go 0.25. You could push it to 0.5. So we have a 0.5, we have a dashed line outside the bleed, perfect. Now to get the one at the bottom, all I have to do is hold the Option key or Alt if you have a PC, hold the Shift key, otherwise it goes wildly around, hold the Shift key, and this will go right down below to where we need it. Perfect. Now we just have to put the fold lines over here. And again, we're going to just hold the Option or Alt key to duplicate these, set them right in the ballpark, and then just to make sure, we're going to let InDesign do the math. So we're going to make sure that those lines are 3.624 plus 3.688. There we go. So we were close. All right, that's the fold lines for our first page. Then on the second page, we have to do the same thing, but opposite. So now the first 2 panels are normal size, and it's the far right panel that's short. So we'll just drag a margin out here and make sure that's the full size, which is 3.688. And then the second one we'll put out here somewhere, and that would be 3.688 plus 3.688. And what that will leave us with is the remaining 3.624. These add up to exactly 11. Now to put the trim marks on there, why not save a little time and borrow these ones? So I'm going to copy these, Command C, and then when I come onto page 2, I'm going to say paste in place. Now are those in place? No. They're not, because it's the opposite of the other side. So I'll get them in the ballpark, but of course, when it comes to InDesign and printing like this, it has to be precision. So I want to make this 3.688 for the first one and 3.688. And I think you can do times with an asterisk. Let's see. Yeah, that works. Okay, so now we have our fold lines in, and the only thing left to do is put our margin lines in. Now for the interior of this brochure especially, but even on the outside, I really can't afford to put margins that wide on the inside. On the inside, I want my margins to be 0.25. So I'm just going to drag something out here. And remember, this is the outside, page 1. And I'm going to do the math, which is this panel, 3.624 minus 0.25. That's margin number 1. 3.624 plus 0.25. And then I just go on doing that. So now I'll drag a guide to the left and right of my fold line, and then I'll click on them to make them accurate. Let's see if it'll do a 3-part equation. 3.624 plus 3.688 minus 0.25. So I've done panel 1 plus panel 2, and then minus 2.25 to get the margin. Now this one, same thing except for plus. So 3.624 plus the second panel, 3.688 plus 0.25. And there's my margin. You can drag all the margins in if you want, and then do the math around each fold line. So this one, now we're on the bottom part, so the first 2 panels are normal and the far right one is short. So this one would just be the 3.688 minus 0.25. And then this one would just be 3.688 plus 0.25. And then this one is 3.688, the first panel, plus the second panel, 3.688, minus 0.25. And then this one would be 3.688 plus 3.688 plus 0.25. And there you go. All our margins are precise and set up, and these margins are going to totally dominate the organization of type on this brochure, and it's really important. Since your OC planetarium is also the same size trifold, you could actually save this right now as a trifold template for yourself. Now granted, these outside margins are 0.5 and the inside margins are 0.25 on either side of the fold. So you have to make sure that that's what you want. You might want less margins. If you have a lot of copy, it's pretty tough to pull off a big wide margin, but you could go 0.25 all around. At any rate, make sure you save this before you start building so that you have this already built for your project. Now let's start working on page 1.